Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Matthew Mumbles. And on this podcast show, well, my name is Matthew first and foremost. On this podcast show, we pretty much talk about whatever we want to talk about. It could be my life stories, my projects, my interests, things happening in the world right now, etc. Today, I thought it would be fun to make an episode purely dedicated to my past scrapped projects, specifically the shows of the channel. Now, as anyone who has been a viewer of my channel knows, at any point in time at least, unless you were a viewer back in August to June where I didn't have any shows, you would know that I love making shows. They're one of my biggest passion projects of the entire thing. And I've had a lot of shows come and gone over the years, some that have stuck around for longer than others, T.O.S.G, and other ones that, just kind of like ran their course and ended, like Llama Man, Snakey, and Secondly Object Show. But I made a ton of other, not just object shows, but like shows in general that I have conceived ideas for over the years. But there was just a bunch of scrap things that I just never got into, so we're going to be going ahead and talking about it. These are all pulled from my website, which you can actually find in my bio, which if you have not checked that out, that's basically like a hub for everything Matthew T.O.S.G, everything that I created, all in one place. So definitely check that out if that tickles your fancy. So let's go ahead and start with the first one, Godzilla Monsters, a show based around the 1988 NES game of the same name would have followed Godzilla, his dad Gojira, and his girlfriend Mothra going on adventures, scrapped after being turned into the basis for the Angry Birds and Godzilla show. Now, to add a bit more context to it, I remember about like early 2016, mid 2016 was when I first conceived of the idea. And what really kicked it off for me was the fact that I got like two Godzilla figures at that time. There was the NECA 54 and the NECA 88, or the NES Godzilla, which would later become Game Godzilla on the channel. But this was before Game Godzilla. At the time, this was basically my first idea of making a show because, I always wanted to make some sort of Godzilla show of some form. And because like these figures and I had like so much ideas that I could turn this into something. However, at the time I didn't have a Mothra figure, and this was around the time where Toho was really strict on Godzilla figures being manufactured for North America. So just do know that this was like at a very certain point in time. Nowadays, I could have used the NECA Mothra. I could have used one of the Bandai minifigures. I could have used the U2s, the Funko Pop. I could have used even the Haya, which I don't have on order yet, but I might sooner or later. I'm still debating about that. But I could have used any of that. Not at this time. That was before even King of the Monsters existed, so they were still making it, so I think the only readily available Mothra figure they had at the time was the Creations Rainbow Mothra. I could be wrong about that, but that being said, that was also Creations, the most like common toy line that there was. This was like during NECA's heyday, back when they were spewing out amazing Godzilla figures, granted, but they were only Godzilla figures. They weren't just Mothra figures, Rodan figures, nothing like that. So unfortunately, it was just all Godzilla. So because of that, and also because I had another big interest at the time, big whoop, Angry Birds, I decided to merge the idea of making a Godzilla show with an Angry Birds show, because there was a lot of Angry Birds Plus shows running around, and I merged the two together to make the Angry Birds and Godzilla show. Now, I thought I can't remember if this was last minute or right as when I was merging the two ideas, that I swapped the Godzilla from the NES game into the movie Godzilla. At the time, it was the newest one before Shin rolled around. The MonsterVerse Godzilla, just the 2014 Godzilla. And at the time, I did this because it was the most iconic and recognizable version of Godzilla at that time. Yes, I know the Toho Godzilla is very legacy, but as far as like recognizability goes, everyone knows what the MonsterVerse Godzilla looks like. I think I've only met one person who doesn't, and they probably didn't even know, like, really much about Godzilla, but whatever. So, and out of wanting to keep the NES Godzilla character, I instead made him the villain, and I gave him a new name. The game Godzilla. He's essentially both Angry Birds and Godzilla mixed into one. He's got the anger and temperament of that of Red, and he's also from a video game, but he's also Godzilla's doppelganger, and he has like the big confidence and kind of leadership of Godzilla. So he's essentially just Red and Godzilla merged into one, which makes him the perfect villain. And then comes the Bad Piggies. So I guess they're kind of even there. So that ultimately is what spawned off Godzilla Monster Monsters to become less of its own show and mixed in with the Amber's Godzilla show. Next, we're going to start off with Super Mario, a potential spin-off to the Amber's Godzilla show that would have featured Mario as the central lead, with Luigi, Bowser, and Koopa Shell making appearances, scrapped for lack of motivation. This one, I feel, was just scrapped for being a little too simple. I didn't have much of a story. I didn't have much of ideas. I didn't have much to it at all, anything. It was just a spin-off that existed for the sake of existing. And I think ultimately, even at this point in my life, because this was like 2017, 2018, I really wanted some shows that actually kind of stood out on their own two legs. And while I do love the Super Mario series, I think that there was just enough Mario Plus shows. Like, for example, the Cute Mario Bros. And I know this one is not a Plus show, but it still counts as a Mario show. SMG4 and formerly SML before they got that cease and desist letter. So there was already a lot of Mario shows that I feel like I wouldn't be able to bring new to the table unless if I wanted to bring in Angry Birds and Godzilla, which at that point I might as well just make it an Angry Birds Godzilla show episode instead of a Mario spinoff. So I think ultimately for that and the lack of motivation, really, when I tried to make it, I'm not saying I started filming, but I did try to make it at one point. It just didn't really feel 100% with me. So ultimately that was scrapped. Sonic the Hedgehog, the miniseries. Now this is only one of two shows on this list that actually got somewhere and actually does have a pilot completed. I actually filmed it and uploaded it and was going to make a movie out of it, but unfortunately the only reason why this show was made was because of my brother. Anyone who's met my brother knows of how much of a big Sonic fan he is. Like, seriously. That's the only reason why he's in Tavius, too. So I wanted to maybe try and see if I can bring something new to the table. So it would have been a show starring Sonic and his friends fighting Dr. Robotnik in a 3-part miniseries, scrapped for lack of interest in the project and entirely the Sonic franchise as a whole. I'm not a Sonic fan. Plain and simple, I'm not a Sonic fan. I never liked Sonic all that much. I mean, I played some of the games. I thought they were cool. But look, I'm always going to be a Mario guy for life. Mario number 1, Sonic number 2. Sorry, Sonic fans, I just like Mario more. But that being said, I just could not bring myself to make this project. I tried making episode 1. I did it. But after that, it was just... I tried bringing it back, but it just did not work still. It feels like Sonic should just not be a part of the channel, like, in that way anymore. I mean, then it's about my interests. I'm not really much of a Sonic guy. Again, I've watched some of Sonic X, a lot of Underground, because that was actually kind of cool, and played a little bit of games, but again, it's so minuscule. It's like water droplets compared to the waterfall that is the Mario, if not an ocean of Mario for me, by comparison. So, yeah, that's ultimately why. Five Nights at Freddy's. So, this one would have been a series featuring the core four of FNAF, Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, and maybe Golden Freddy, as they go on adventures together, both inside and outside the pizzeria, scrapped for lack of props and story ideas. This one I had the idea for because, well, Five Nights at Freddy's was in the big boom still at the time, which it just never went away. So we had like these, the Funko action figures, and I could have used them. I definitely think I could have. Problem is those those figures, and I even consider using the Funko Pops, but like those just look weird by comparison. Is that they just went missing? Like they easily fall out. That's the big problem with those figures. I've done a few figure reviews, like only two, I think, three, maybe. I'm not actually too sure of like Funko FNAF merch, and like my biggest problem is that they fall out way too easily for action figures. I get it. You can swap them, you can mix and match. I get that. That's a toy gimmick. But if it's an action figure, that's something that should not happen. The only reason why a joint should be popping out in the first place is because to swap out an accessory, which keep in mind these figures do not have the ability to do so. They have accessories, but you don't need to swap out joints for. But they are not meant to swap out with other figures. These ones, they're toys. They shouldn't be branded as action figures, in my opinion. So ultimately, that's why they went missing, and I just couldn't use them anymore. So that's why. Also, story ideas, not much to work with off than a game, and that you just sit in one room. And I get it. There's a lot of lore. There's a lot of complex stuff, but I was not into it as much. So yeah, that's why. Captain Underpants, the first epic show. A show starring George Beard and Harold Hutchins fighting crime alongside their comic book superhero Captain Underpants, scrapped after losing interest in the Captain Underpants book series, and especially after the Netflix series came out. Now, I'm just going to say this. Again, Captain Underpants was one of my biggest interests back in 2013 to 17. I read those books like there was no tomorrow, and there was a lot. There was truly a lot there. And I think what was really like the biggest thing for me was the movie. I love the books, but the movie was like, it felt like a conclusion to the interest in a way. And while I did like the movie, I felt like that was a good way to cap it off. I just felt myself like fading out with interest with the Captain Underpants franchise, especially after they discontinued it with the 12th and final book. And Dogman, while it is great, again, it's just a little childish for me nowadays. I'm not calling Dogman childish. It's just, for me, am I supposed to be reading books about a full-grown man in his underpants? Maybe for the nostalgia value, but I don't think I'm supposed to be. I mean, if you want to, that's your own decision. But for me, nah. I grew out of that. So, and not to mention, the toys that came out for the movie, which was what I was going to use, never, ever arrived. Well, I'm not saying I ordered them, but just the stores never got them for some reason. So, I'm guessing it's because, like, Captain Underpants, and I hate saying this, is such a more niche property in comparison to DreamWorks' other works. Don't get me wrong, it's a cult classic. But the box office shows, like, this movie made, like, I think 130 million worldwide versus the Boss Baby and Trolls making, like, over 500 mil each. Is that actually right? Hold on, let me check. Okay, so I was right about Boss Baby, but not about Trolls. That made, like, 300 mil, so yeah, it's just in by comparison, Captain Underpants didn't flop, it just didn't do as well. So I guess as well, and especially like that Netflix series, like the reason I wanted to make the show was because there was no CU show. But then comes the Netflix series, and I was just like, do I really have to do this anymore? Nah, I'm good. And I'm gonna say this in the nicest way possible before this turns into a Captain Underpants show review. The show sucks. Like, I'm sorry. As someone who grew up with the books, the show sucks. It just doesn't have the same heart and passion thrown into it as the movie and the books do. I don't know what it is about it. It just doesn't feel the same. And then, of course, it's not going to be the same. It just doesn't feel like Captain Underpants the way I grew up with it. So that's a whole conversation for another day. Objectified Objects, the baseball marble show. I'm gonna keep this brief because I already made like a 16-minute long video about this last year. A series based on a now canceled object show, Baseball Marble, host a talk show where they interview contestants from the original show while also getting to fight over who has the better host. Scrapped due to the original series getting canceled and lost contact with the original series creator. So, as you guys know, like, listen, Objectified Objects, you can just go watch that video if you want more info. But that, again, is the one of only two shows, that Sonic and this, that actually had their pilots completed. Like, their very first episodes. And then it was supposed to go off to the races the same way my other shows did, but just it didn't do it. Not for me. So that's why I'm not talking about OO like that again. And I love OO, but it's just a whole different conversation at that point. The last one on this list, Matthew's Land of Frog reviews plus other Disney TVA review shows, would have mostly been about a fictional version of me going crazy over Disney TVA shows and reviewing them. Scrapped due to Matthew's House of Hour reviews, his poor performance on the channel, and now canceled after 3 episodes. That's not true about the cancellation of 3 episodes. Stay tuned, people. Season 2 is coming. That being said, why did I cancel it? Well, again, it says right there because of the low performance. I was planning so much of Matthew's blank of blank reviews. I actually renamed the Amphibia series to Land of Amphibian reviews as opposed to Frog reviews. But it just was not working for me. It just was not. I just don't see the appeal in making so many shows that are based around the same type of concept, just different shows. That's the only thing. I could have made this its own sub-show, like reviewing all the episodes. That's what I could have done, but unfortunately I kneecapped that right out of the gate by making it all a live comedy sketch that would have taken away from the production time of all the other shows that I'm much more passionate about, aka T.O.S.G, GG, SSS, and everything else. Assuming that SSS would have been created around this time, which it was to a point, but not by me. But really, Land of Frog reviews or Land of Amphibian reviews would have been based on Amphibia. I planned one for Gravity Falls, and I planned one for Hilda. I didn't really think about Molly McGee because, like, I actually still, would you guys believe me if I still have not watched a single episode of Molly McGee yet? Yeah, I just don't really care for Disney TVA shows anymore after Amphibia and T.O.S.G ended. No shade to the other cartoons. Again, I think that they're really talented people. I just don't care for them. The shows themselves. So, especially because I did not want to make like so many House of Hour reviews episodes if they were just all going to fail like that. So I began prioritizing shows that I either care about a lot or people actually cared about themselves. And seeing as House of Hour reviews didn't check off either checkbox, I canned season 1 after 3 episodes, which I'm just going to give the update here, will be actually a plot point within season 2. It's not another review show, it's more of a comedy sketch, but I think it's a very good comedy sketch. It's a very different one. If anyone saw the Muppets movie from 2011, I think it was from 2011. I don't know. You know exactly what I'm talking about here. So, it's like a show that exists within the characters of the show, like as if they're actors. So, that's how that's gonna play out. And the last one we're actually going to do is Winnie the Pooh Pit. Which, what? Winnie the Pooh Pit was supposed to get a show? Yes, technically, actually. Before I developed the idea for the short film, there was supposed to be a Winnie the Pooh style show I would make. And actually, I remember specifically what it was about. It was going to be a sci-fi epic in space. This was before the Adventures of Super Red, but basically, they would have had Pooh and Piglet going around space, maybe Eeyore, going around space and trying to find honey on like some sort of like distant planet. It would have been like sci-fi. I had things ready for it, I think. I had the puppets ready. However, I instead repurposed them for Winnie the Pooh Pit instead as a short film more akin to the original. So I decided to do that instead, and ultimately, I think The Adventures of Super Red definitely worked out better because The only reason I did poo was because he landed in public domain and I saw all the craze, so I just wanted to make my own take on it. And I think between that and Mickey Mouse, which I just put out the novel for it, or a short film for it, short story, I meant on Wattpad, I think I'm good with public domain stuff. Maybe something for Kong, but that's about it. I want to create more of my original things, not just things that are based on things, but whatever. I mean, I say that and I make more Tabgus episodes. But that being said, thank you guys for listening to this episode of Matthew Mumbles. If you guys liked it, definitely subscribe to the channel. Like the video if you want. If you really like any of these ideas, believe in Jesus, accept him as Lord and Savior today, spread the gospel. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out, everyone. Bonus! Yeah, that's right. I tried recording this section already, but it just buzzed out completely. So we're going to talk about some more shows I forgot to mention. Vlogs with Godzilla Jr. and Little Red. This was supposed to be like a spin-off of sorts that would have had the two like vlogging their behind-the-scenes experiences. This was ultimately scrapped because there was just no substance to this show, and even after I tried to bring it back with the Game Godzilla show's release publicly, it just didn't mix well. It just felt forced, and there was no reason for it to exist. So I just took the pilot, rebranded it as a short, and went off with my life. Another one was supposed to be Matthew, the reboot for Matthew's House of Art Reviews. This one was canceled because, well, okay, let me just briefly explain. It was supposed to be a show about my personal problems and a healthy, what I thought was healthy way of trying to vent myself. Essentially, it was like a vent type show. Because at the time I was dealing with a lot of personal problems mentally, and I decided to put it into like a show. It didn't turn out as healthy as I wanted it to be, or as I needed it to be at the time, and I found more healthier ways to deal with the stress and mental health problems that I was dealing with at the time via praying, of course. Anyone knows I'm a Christian, so I pray to God. And at the time especially, I definitely liked the idea of putting more live-action skits in my shows, so that's why I mixed the two, essentially putting that live-action element back in, and renewing Matthew's House of Art Reviews for a second season. And the last show is the yearly object show, the Daily for a Year object show, which just the name alone makes me hurl, because under no circumstance should anyone even try to do that, because when I made TDF MOS, I was thinking, how could I top this? So I thought up a Daily for a Year object show. That would have required 365 consecutive daily episodes. Regardless if it's live action or animation, someone is going to get burnt out, bored of it, or just hate the idea. And even me. I get it. I do daily videos. I love doing Angry Birds Godzilla show, which was at one point daily. But here's the thing. Something like Tabgus and something like GG actually have some creative elements. It's not just the same thing over and over again. For Tabgus, it's not just a bad guy shows up, Ran Godzilla has to save the day. That's not what it is. GG is also not just a challenge and an elimination. That's not what it is. There's a story to these characters. There's a actual fundamental building theme with this. And that's ultimately why the show of the Daily for a Year object show was canceled. And despite the fact it never even got far, it was just a thought in my mind, but canceled midway. So really, I just didn't see the appeal in making that show whatsoever. It would be dead weight, and not to mention it would clog up my channel severely. So unfortunately, fortunately in this case, because I do not like that idea and I will never revisit that idea ever in my life, the Daily for a Year object show will not be a thing. So yeah, now that's really the end of this podcast episode. Believe in Jesus, accept him as your Lord and Savior today, spread the gospel, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace out, everyone. God bless.